there it is. Took a little while for the stream to pick up. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining a little bit early today. We had some scheduling issues for later, so we wanted to have Emily on today, and so we adjusted the time. So I appreciate that you are joining us. And if you're joining us in the replay, we always appreciate that as well, too. So remember, if you are watching live, give me a hashtag live. If you're watching in the replay, a hashtag replay. Emily is an amazing person, and I will get to her in just a minute, but I want to tell you a little bit more about hashtag No Limits. It is a show about people who have had limits placed upon them by society, but who have busted through those limits. Ophelia says in Hamlet, we know who we are, but not what we will be. And I believe that to be 100% true. And I believe that there is no better example of that than the caterpillar turning into the butterfly. The caterpillar literally dissolves into cells and then reforms itself into the caterpillar, and then has to struggle to get out of the cocoon in order for its wings to be strong enough to fly. That's no easy task, but neither is busting through the limits that society or medical professionals or family members or teachers cognitively have placed on a person. A lot of times these things aren't said, but it's the thought processes that are these limits that people are busting through. Unfortunately, it is also sometimes said that a certain person will not achieve a certain thing. And so today, Emily has a very unique story. Everyone's story is unique, but everyone up until Emily on hashtag No Limits has talked about a child with an IEP or their own experiences that were more, I don't even know how I want to say this, the typical of kind of what you think when you think about an IEP. Emily's story has to deal with gifted IEP. And not only are we going to talk about her experience with gifted IEPs, but she has an interesting assessment that she does that will give you a lot more information than what a typical assessment typically does. So, Emily, thank you for joining me. How are you?
I'm doing awesome, and thank you so much for having me. Our passions align in so many ways, and I love what you're doing here, and it's such a pleasure to be a part of it.
Well, thank you very much. And Emily, I'm actually on your podcast. I believe it's supposed to air next week. Is that correct?
I believe so. But just make sure you're following Shelly, because I'm sure she's going to let all of you know as soon as it comes out. But you gave amazing tips, tricks, and strategies for navigating the IEP process. I learned so much from that. And the podcast is Melious of Misfits. So we will absolutely let you know as soon as it goes live. And I'm sure it's going to be a really popular episode.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your podcast, The Mothers of Misfits, kind of why you started it and kind of, a little bit information of who you have on there and what your purpose is.
Yeah. So Mothers of Misfits is a passion project of mine, but I'm excited to report it has been in the top 10% of podcasts worldwide for some time now. We're about 2 years old, if I'm doing my math right. Have amazing guests like people like you. And our goal is to have conversations about advocating for our kids in a one-size-fits-all world. And it's a passion of mine because my life's work is to help people create more fulfilling careers and lives. And I've talked to a lot of adults along the way who felt like a misfit and never thought that was a good thing. And that really broke my heart. And then when I became a mom, I've got 2 boys. They're 8 and 6, and we're going to talk about my 8-year-old. When I became a mom, I experienced having a misfit and being in the mom role and being the advocate for him. And I realized how challenging that was. And that, there's lots of opportunities to get together with other parents and talk about, my child's on dean lists and my child's the head cheerleader. And those are great things. And we should absolutely celebrate those. But there weren't as many opportunities to say, hey, my child's failing school, or I have no idea what I'm doing in having these IEP meetings, or, kind of the misfit challenges. And so that's where Mothers of Misfits was born. And it's just been such a crazy, fun ride. And I've learned a lot. And I'm just, again, so thankful that it's brought me to amazing people like you who are promoting these kinds of conversations on a regular basis.
Well, I very much enjoyed our conversation. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to tell a little secret of what happened the day.
Oh, no. It was a technological nightmare, but yes, you can totally expose what happened that day.
Well, and that's all I really was going to say was that there were some technical difficulties, and but I very much enjoyed being on the show, and I hope that it will bring awareness to your listeners as well as what you're going to bring to my listeners today. And so let's get into that a little bit. Let's talk about your son and what gifted IEP. I mean, that's just not something that you hear about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I knew no different because, I knew of IEPs. It was new to me to call it a GIEP. But when we got a huge education all at once when we were understanding how to advocate for Mason. So Mason's my 8-year-old, and he's my oldest. So we didn't really know any different. We didn't have other kids to compare him with, other children to see what milestones happened when. My sister has an older son, 2 years older than Mason, than a child who's 3 weeks older than Mason. So we kind of had the cousin comparison. But then we had our second son, and around Mason's second or third birthday, it started to become obvious that he picked things up well. He, particularly the vocabulary, he was fluently reading chapter books when he was 4 years old. But we still were kind of naive to that not being normal because he was our firstborn. We just did, and he was in daycare programs that had curriculums. We thought, wow, they're doing a great job. We kind of thought it was the norm. And interestingly enough, the creator of the assessments that I use in my work life for people of all ages and stages of life, we actually have an assessment for kiddos. And my poor kids never had a chance. As soon as they turned 3, which is the age at which they were eligible to complete this assessment, I put them through. It was 3 or 4 years old. Had Mason go through this assessment to get at his natural abilities, how he naturally operates. And the creator of that assessment said, he's gifted, right? And I said, no. And the purpose of that assessment was not to measure intellectual ability, but she, in her work with people and students and families, and also understanding the differences between how we operate and how our brains work and intellect and intelligence, she's the first person who said, hey, I think you really you should keep an eye out for that. And as soon as she said that, the light bulb went off, right? It was, oh, wow. Okay, now I see all of the things that he's doing through a different lens. It makes more sense. And we also, my husband and I, had that immediate naive thought, which was, oh, okay, so school's going to be easy.
Right?
Right.
And I don't think that's a naive thought. I think that's very typical. It's he's gifted. School's going to be a breeze. Academics are not going to be a problem at all. Right.
So definitely did not see headwinds in our future because of that. It was more awesome. This is great. And my husband and I like to think we're pretty smart people. We did well in school. So it was kind of okay, he's going to go in that line. But something we also learned from the actual assessment that we did with him was that he does not learn or operate like what I would consider a typical gifted child, or I don't know that there is a typical gifted child, but what I think the school system would think of as a gifted child. We think that star student who is detailed and structured and risk mitigative, thorough, accurate, right? Doesn't take risk, gets it right the first time, doesn't need to be hands-on and physical. They can, handle things in a conceptual kind of way. And he is not at all like that. He doesn't need to prove every point. He doesn't need to dot every I, cross every T, be extremely thorough. He doesn't do things in order. In fact, he multitasks. He does lots of things at the same time. He needs to take risk and experimentation, do it lots of different ways. He talks while he's processing. So there's a lot of communication, verbal communication, and he's also pretty tactile. So basically what happened was we had this, okay, he's really smart. So already things are moving at a fast pace. The ability for him to grasp something, learn it, process it, and move on is incredible. He also is a misfit with the way school expects him to learn. He's not going to really do it the way that the teachers do it. And so that's where pretty much we actually were really ahead of the game. We gave the public school system, which we have a fabulous school system where we live where we do because of the public schools. So before he got to kindergarten, I called a meeting and was like, heads up. I just want to let you know, like, he's past spelling words of dog, cat, rat, bat, right? We got to figure this out. And right then I lost all my naivety. They're great people. I don't want to take away from the people, and they've been helpful, but it was obvious to me at that point that this was not going to be easy. And a gifted student has different, but a lot of challenges, just like those students who are anywhere else outside of the normal or the average. And it's definitely a lot for parents to learn. And I'm not saying I'm not grateful for his abilities, but it definitely, it's not a walk in the park just because you're smart. And that's where I learned about, the IEP, the GIEP, and all of that whole process. And I'm certainly still no expert like you are, but I'm learning.
Well, and I appreciate your candor with everything. So when he started school, was he 3 or did he start a little bit later?
Well, our school system here requires you to be at least 5.
Okay.
Or there's like a 10 days of wiggle room because we actually tested in our younger son, but he was 5. But that's pretty countercultural, especially in our district. I would say a lot of the kids, and this is kindergarten, a lot of the kids start at 6 and many of them turn 7 while in kindergarten.
Wow.
So that's one of the challenges of being a parent to a gifted child, is knowing that their brains are at a different maturity level than their bodies and their emotions,
right?
And their social abilities. So that's another thing that I'm preparing for because we can get into this. I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but last year, because of all the COVID craziness and our public school system wasn't in school 5 days a week, and my husband and I both work full time, that just wasn't something we could make work and wasn't serving the boys. So we put them in a private school, but Mason actually skipped 2nd grade. So he skipped an entire grade, went into 3rd grade, but that was not an easy decision. And actually we put him back in 3rd grade, coming back to public school. But these are just these weird things that you have to think about. Do you put him with his physical, biological peers who, are going to look more like him, act more like him, be more natural friends? But is he bored out of his mind in class and potentially having behavioral problems as a result, which thankfully we haven't really had pop up. But, for all of 1st grade and kindergarten, every single day, I hate school. I hate school. I hate this. That's a horrible thing to hear because he was bored. He was bored. So forgive me, I'm going off on tangents, but there's just interesting challenges that don't, come to mind right away, but it's accommodating. And I'm sure so many parents listening and experts out there can appreciate. And I think that's what being a misfit is, right? You don't fit the mold. And so how do you accommodate these different variables at the same time in the best way possible while not being unfair to the system and the people in it?
Right. And I'm so excited to have you to share these challenges because it's very interesting to me to hear when you said the phrase, his mind is so much older or more mature than his body. And typically I deal with the opposite. where, the body is biologically a certain age, but the brain is much younger. And so, or the maturity level is much younger. And so, for me, you are helping me bust through my own cognitive biases of what it is to be a person with a gifted eligibility. And it's technically not even an eligibility. Giftedness does fall under the special education umbrella, but it's not technically an eligibility. So it's interesting that they've given him an IEP. And I wanted to kind of look into that a little bit more and figure out exactly, what that entails. I've personally never had any students have that, so I don't know exactly, but I'm very happy that he has something that is addressing his uniqueness and his individual education plan. And I know that gifted, like I said, I know it falls under that special education umbrella because it's supposed to be. Now, I don't know, it's supposed to be, so I don't know if it's happening, but specially designed instruction. That's one of the main caveats of specialized or special education, is that it's outside of the general education, either through accommodations or actual change in curriculum or just some extra, supports of some sort. And so what sorts of things has his school done for him to address that giftedness?
So I will say this is tough, and I try to be really empathetic. I'm sure not great all the time at seeing all sides, but hey, my job is to be a mama bear. So Absolutely. I'm in that advocacy role first. This is frustrating though, this particular point. And I think it'll change over his educational experience. It's my understanding that the older he gets, because he's still in third grade, it's elementary school. The older he gets, the more the system is equipped to handle a gifted child. I don't have research to back this up, but from my experience and talking to people, I think it's pretty rare that we've identified this before he was in kindergarten. I think for most students, it becomes more obvious over time, maybe that third or fourth grade mark or even beyond. So I would love to see more accommodations because right now, primarily what happens is he receives, there's a specialist inside of his school, and she works with all of the gifted students, and he goes to see her in lieu of a different class. I believe it's twice a week, 45 minutes. So it's 90 minutes. What really frustrates me about this, and I can see your face, and please, I am no attorney. I'm just a mom. So definitely check out, anything I say, double check it and cross-reference it. But the sticking point and the whole purpose between an IEP is that you get that individualized instruction, right? And there should be differentiation within what they're doing. So frankly, I don't love that it's like, okay, here's your gifted time, and then here's your non-gifted time, right? It's like an extra, and then you're still doing the norm inside of the classroom for that other 80% of the time. And then here's your carve out. The way I envision what should be happening is, okay, we're giving a spelling test, and we've pre-tested Mason in advance, and he needs fifth grade spelling words, whereas everybody else is taking a third grade spelling word, but they're all doing spelling. It's just that he's getting the level that is appropriate for him. It's not my understanding that that's happening. I will say that he does go to fourth grade math. So he's not doing third grade math and sort of fourth grade, but outside of that and the 90 minutes a week, he's doing what everyone else is doing. So I would love to see that pushed a bit more to be more individualized 100% of the time. I mean, again, within reason. But one of the things, I think we even chatted about this, one of the frustrations that I believe other gifted parents share as well, and gifted students can feel, is it can feel like a punishment. Because what happens, and we've seen it with Mason, is because the gifted is treated as like extra, do your normal work and then do extra. So for example, you're really smart, you process quickly, so you're going to finish the math assignment in 5 minutes. Everybody else needs the full 30 minutes. So we're just going to give you 5 extra worksheets to do. Or for him, what's frustrating is he misses something that's happening with his classmates to go to the gifted time with that special resource teacher. He's still expected to do the assignments that were taking place while he was over at his resource teacher. So that gets really hairy and uncomfortable for me, because he's wising up to the fact of like, wait a minute, why am I getting more work? Why am I having to do more things? Again, it's more about differentiation, not addition of work.
Right.
And that's something that you got to pick your battles, but I hope to get better at advocating for him in those ways and setting him up for advocating for himself in regards to, hey, just make this assignment or this subject meet my level. Don't make me do this and then some. It's not a plus thing.
Right. And I think that is probably something that parents with a typical IEP also struggle with, because oftentimes the child is missing out in something in their gen ed room if they get pulled out to go for their special education services. And often they are expected to complete whatever they missed while they were getting their special education services, which is part of the reason behind the teachers pushing in to the gen ed classrooms. Unfortunately, even when I was teaching before we had a shortage, there still weren't enough teachers to push into every person's class to help with what they would need all across the country. And so that was always a struggle of mine as the special education teacher. When I would have students come to me, in our role as the special education teacher for some students is to try to lessen a gap, fill in little pockets of maybe things that the student, for whatever reason, just hadn't caught on to, learned, been taught, whatever, prior to the grade level that they're in, but also keep them on grade level and doing what their grade level peers were doing. And there was, it always felt like a balancing act. And I always felt like I was falling because I never could find that, okay, we're going to work, 10 minutes on, maybe it was a comprehension skill that they had a deficit in, but we also have to read the story that your class is reading this week and squeeze that in because you're missing that when you're with me. And, we have to work on and it was difficult. And I'm not the only teacher in the world. And so hopefully there are many more teachers, that have figured that out. But I know that is a concern, that oftentimes that gap becomes bigger. And so with Mason, I'm almost wondering if his desire to continue to want to learn is going to lessen because of them not challenging him. But
that's
like
the
you said,
concern.
It does. It feels like a punishment. And I've heard that about gifted programs because we really aren't, as special education teachers, trained about gifted.
I think a lot of us think, like my husband and I did, is, okay, school's easy for them. Right? I think it's easy to just be dismissive of, we don't have to worry about those kids. They're fine. They're going to be fine. Right. This is easy peasy.
Right.
But to your point, the big danger is we lose them. They totally disengage, or they come home every single day and complain about how much they hate school. He was bored out of his mind. And then they become the disruptors. They become the behavioral problems. And then they lose a love for learning. Also, a big, big danger for gifted kids is a severe case of imposter syndrome later in life. When they are not challenged regularly, and especially through the school system, then, if everything comes easy, then when, not if, but when something becomes hard. And there's lots of examples, anecdotal of this. I'm sure, again, there's good research of this where, you know, they get to Harvard and they realize, oh my goodness, everybody's smart here, or I got a C on a test.
Yeah.
Not citing Harvard, but right. You know, like they get to these big places where they're not on top of things in the same way, or it's not so easy. It's not a given.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, because those students have never faced that on a smaller level or along the way, not only is it just a big challenge, it actually makes them question their entire identity. Am I really smart? Has everybody lied to me my entire life? Am I actually good at any of this? And so that's a big worry for us, is we really actually want school to be hard, not unnecessarily hard for Mason.
Right.
But I want him to struggle to get a good grade on a test. He has never struggled to get a good grade on the test. And let me tell you what, it's actually pretty nice as a parent. I mean, we don't have to hound him for studying. We don't have to hound him for doing his homework or sitting there for hours, because it's just so easy. And sometimes it's pretty nice. But he needs to work for it, or I fear what might happen later in life. Again, when the headwinds come, you know, I need him to have the character to know how to deal with that and not have that rock him so deeply to his core that he questions who he is or his entire past and accomplishments up to that point.
Yeah. And that's an excellent, excellent point. We as teachers really do tend not to think about the future. Mm-hmm. We think about our classroom for the year. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, and I think right now, especially, teachers are just thinking, I just got to get through the day with all the teacher shortages, with all the sub shortages, with the stress of, are we remote? Are we hybrid? Are we in person? Mask, no mask, vaccine, no vaccine. Mm-hmm. I mean, just everything on top of the normal that we had 2 years ago. And so we need to do better at that, because we really are. I mean, an IEP is to prepare a child for further education, employment, and independent living. And I'm not a lawyer, you know, like you mentioned about yourself earlier, but that does come directly from the federal law of Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Of the last time it was revised was in 2004. And we really just don't think about that, especially as special education teachers. And honestly, I don't think the gen ed teachers do either. The curriculum is just already designed to be doing that. But with special education, we're supposed to get a specially designed instruction. And there isn't a curriculum that you can go to and say, oh, okay, I teach fourth grade special education, so here I'm going to pull this curriculum. They can't do that because it's not going to reach everybody. And therefore, the whole idea of individualizing the education doesn't work. But, you know, it's something that we're like, okay, well, they have this gap, or they have this extra skill. I don't even know if that's the right way to say it, but I'm so used to saying deficits that I'm not really sure how to refer to, you know,
capabilities, maybe, or I think like speed of acquisition. He moves at a different pace.
Yeah.
That would probably be the best way to describe it. And something else to add to the challenge. And I mean, man, I think the last job that I would do or could do well is being a teacher. I commend them. I mean, everything that you just said, and they still show up with a smile every day. And we've really appreciated all of the teachers. And I know their heart has always been in the right place. And I don't know how they do it. But something else that's challenging, and another myth busting moment, is that we often assume that when a child is gifted, that they're smart all across the board. That they are good at math, science, history, right? So that everything, they excel in everything. But it's actually much more common, I believe, or very possible to be what they call asynchronously gifted. So that poses a challenge as well to individualize this. And we need to make sure we understand exactly where the child is gifted, because some might be gifted in math, but be on par or even at a deficit in reading.
Yep.
And again, I don't know how to solve for that, but these are just some of the challenges where what I come back to and is at the heart of my podcast and really my work for a living is they're just the one size fits all just force fits everybody and doesn't serve anybody in my mind. Yeah. So how can we keep our eye on the result, but give more freedom and individual pathways to get there? And I do know through the work that I do that only 20% of students are actually wired to do well in school. And so that means that 80% of them, by a little or a lot, learn differently than what that environment allows for. And that to me, that's the unacceptable.
Wow.
And that's why, gosh, I think, so many people learn to be a misfit. Right. Again, not always feeling like it's a good thing really early on in life, and, way to hit a brick wall early on. And some people, I think, have a trauma in their educational experience that they don't even fully recover from. I've talked to a lot of those folks. I mean, school for them was truly traumatic. And again, I don't think anybody intended to have it be that way. So it's not a malicious intent, but forcing people into the one size fits all, the one right way is not only ineffective, it's dangerous.
Right. Mm-hmm. And you just totally blew my mind with that statistic, because when I was in my undergrad, we were taught, and this was a very long time ago, that we teach to 80% of the population because the way that we were taught to teach was supposedly able to reach 80% of the population. And so we automatically knew that there was 20% that likely were going to need a little bit of something different, or they just maybe weren't going to catch what we were throwing at them, so to speak. But now you're saying that it's more the opposite.
Yep. So, and this is based off of non-intelligence, but operational style, if you will. So each and every human being is born with a natural pattern for taking action and solving problems and getting results. This is totally independent from the cognitive part of our minds, which is our intelligence, our thinking ability. It's also completely independent from the affective part of our minds, which houses our personality, our feelings, our preferences, our emotions, likes and dislikes. So all of these things have to play together ultimately. But the third part of the mind, which is sadly something very few people know about, particularly inside of the educational system, it's called the cognitive part of the mind, or conation. Again, independent from intelligence and personality. And it's actually in the back most primitive part of our brains, the occipital lobe. And it's determining that instinctual way. Once we're engaged, once we're motivated to take action, we allocate our efforts in a certain way. And it's the cognitive part of the mind that determines that. And what's so powerful about this particular piece of our mind's puzzle is that it never changes. So this modus operandi that we have at birth sticks with us through life. So no matter how old we are, how smart we are, what our labels are, what our diagnoses are, what our abilities or challenges are, what our stage of life is, a career path, it doesn't matter. It stays the same. It is fixed. It's a non-negotiable. But it determines how we best learn when free to be ourselves, right? So and it's a beautiful picture of there's no one right way. There's just a lot of different ways. And the company who has done incredible amounts of research on this, leader on this, 45 plus years of research is Colby Corporation. They're based out in Phoenix, Arizona. The founder, Kathy Colby, she's the one who identified that my son is gifted. She's been a longtime mentor of mine. They also have a sister company, Dynamind, that actually specifically focuses on work with youth. But what they found is that the 20% of the population of students who is wired to operate like the teachers, and the teachers are a pretty homogeneous group when it comes to that MO, that approach to problem solving. And therefore the system is built for that. And what do I mean by that? Well, being thorough and detail oriented, being methodical and structured, one thing at a time, risk mitigative, so not experimenting, trial and error, but doing it the right time or, the right way the first time kind of thing, and being conceptual, not hands-on learning, but, picturing in your minds and sitting lecture learning, right? Sitting at your desk learning. So the 20% of students who play into that, this is just astounding to me. Their grades, the GPA distribution is highest amongst that 20%.
Okay.
That has nothing to do with their intelligence.
Right.
So to say it a different way, the grade distribution is given to the best grades are showing in the students whose brain works the way the system works.
Sure.
So the way that they're taught to learn works with how they naturally learn.
Mm-hmm.
And the 80% of students who have a little or a big difference in how they learn are receiving worse grades, not because they're less smart and could even be more smart. So that's what's rocking my world, or when I found that, because school is supposed to be about skills and smarts and knowledge. And how is it that, or we would think then that the performance or the outcomes would be tied to those factors, right? So the smartest kids should perform the best in theory, or the ones who know the skills the most should perform the best. But what the research showed through this organization, I encourage everybody to check it out, is that it has a lot more to do with how your child handles information, how your child handles structure and schedule, how they handle risk. And that just feels totally unfair to me. And so that's why I was saying at the beginning of the show, Mason is really, really smart. We know that. But he doesn't operate the way the system's expecting of him. Right. So there's this weird mishmash clash of realities that I'm still not sure the school system knows how to handle.
Right. And sorry, my dog just joined me. So, and he has not been feeling well. So if he whines a little bit, I apologize for that. But, and I've also injured my finger while you were talking. I was like, okay, I'm looking at my finger.
So sorry.
No, that's all right. And yeah, I mean, what you have just put words to is what I have been seeing for many years and didn't know how to put the words to it. Because I shouldn't say I didn't know how to put the words to it. I didn't know how to put the science behind it. Because I knew that there were all of these kids that I was seeing. And I've said this, there's this eligibility under idea that is a specific learning disability. And I've always changed that LD to specifically learns differently than what the teacher teaches.
Yes.
And but I didn't have all of that information that you just shared to the why is that the way it is. Because like I said, I was told, here, this is the way that you teach, and this is going to reach 80% of the students that you see. And it's for you to tell me that it's the exact opposite of that is just blowing my, still, I'm like, you've just rocked the whole foundation of what I was
Sorry about that. But that's how we get the Steve Jobs. That's how we get the Mark Zuckerbergs. That's how we get, I've got amazing clients who are amazingly successful in life. And they flunked out of or dropped out of school or barely made it by the skin of their teeth. Not because they weren't smart.
Right.
But, and not even, for a while they were motivated. But then they realized, kind of, excuse my language, but damned if I do, damned if I don't. Right. Those students figure out that their way of approaching learning is unwelcomed. But it actually takes 12 times more mental energy to learn in a way that doesn't come naturally. That's exhausting to the brain. It's actually not just emotionally and, mentally exhausting. It is actually physically taxing to the brain. in a way that's unsustainable. And that's what produces burnout. And we talk a lot about burnout in our workplaces and our adult lives, but a tremendous amount of kiddos are in a state of burnout in school. Mm-hmm. And what happens? Well, we disengage because if, I'm not going to go back in there and give it my all and still not get the result I'm looking for, still get, I'll give you a specific example. So Mason has this resource time, and again, great person, great teacher. I want to make sure I'm not coming across against anyone personally, and I'm sure she learned the same things you did, that certain approaches are going to get most of the kids, and it kind of catches the group. But it was really frustrating to me when she shared with us that she gave like a brain teaser to Mason. And it was some kind of like blocks or building activity. We weren't there to see it. She was just sharing with us after the fact. And so she posed this problem to him to solve. And the way Mason operates is he jumps in. So he went right in. He started messing with it. And as a result, he was failing because he's an experimenter. He's a trial and error kind of guy, very tactile. I was probably talking about it as he went along because he's really processes verbally, didn't have a plan before he got in, didn't ask for a lot of clarifying details. He just jumped in.
Right.
That's his creative process. The teacher stopped him and said, wait a minute, Mason. Now, wait a minute. Step back, create a strategy, create a plan so that you get it right the first time.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what we're taught. We're taught. Like I said, you have to have a plan. You have to have a strategy. I mean, even in the new math, the Common Core math, it's not really new anymore, but, and they do have the idea that you can get to the same answer many different ways, but there's still strategies that they want you to try to use. And there's still, like the comprehension pieces, there are still certain strategies of, well, you do this and you'll learn this strategy. You'll learn this comprehensive skill. And I, as a special educator, I might've only had 20 students on my caseload. And I know that this is generally a complaint or a dig on special education teachers is, the general education teachers, well, I have 50 or I have 70 and you only have 20. Okay, you might have 50 or 70, but that's one lesson in science, one lesson in math, one lesson in English, one lesson in social studies, one lesson in writing. I have 20 students. I have 20 lessons in math, 20 lessons in reading, 20, and so on and so forth. And it would frustrate me that they didn't acknowledge that it was, well, you just have less bodies in your room, so your job must be easier. And that, but my thing was always, but everybody learns differently. Every student that comes to my room is, again, they learn differently. And like I said, I would add that thing on of than the way that the teacher teaches. And it's not that the teacher is doing anything bad by the way that they're teaching, but they need to acknowledge that it's even if it was the 80%, there was still that 20% that wasn't going to get it. But I mean, now it's even worse than what I thought.
Right. Well, and why are we force fitting a process rather than focusing on just getting to the result?
Right.
Life doesn't really work like that, at least post-education.
Right.
Right. It's much more about, did you get to the result? And school is very much so, did you follow this process?
And the rules. Yeah. Did you follow the rules?
Yeah. Right? I mean, that's why we give more points for showing your work in math than getting the right answer in math.
Right.
And a certain part of the population, I've coached a lot of them, were so frustrated that they had to show their work because their process was their own way of learning and dealing with the world was not to do that, right? That slowed them down. That was friction in their path. So, the answer in my mind is just a results-focused system. And giving freedom and actually encouraging multiple routes. I mean, the wrong answer is not a good thing, right? So getting the wrong result is really what we should reward or correct. But I remember I got A's, I worked really hard in school, and I always got A's in English. I was really good at writing papers. I had great teachers, but I hated the writing process. So what I would do is I would write my paper, the paper that I got an A on, but the teachers would require me to go through the writing process, right? So I would go backwards from the end result of having written the paper and make the note cards that I was supposed to make, and then make the outline that I was supposed to make, right? Which I get the intention was, that all builds so that you can get an A, so that you can get this great end result. For me, that was way too rigid and onerous of a process. I didn't need that. Now, it's great to present that as an option, but I was graded on having to go through that process that worked for my teacher, but didn't work for me, even though I got an A grade without it. So it was grading, can you fit the process, not can you get to the end result? And that it was extra work then. And that's where we get back to we're disincentivizing students, or even, burning them out by making them go through certain steps versus understanding how they naturally operate, how they get to that end result, being clear about what that result needs to be, but giving them space to get there in their own way. And I'm not suggesting the teacher too should be able to operate in his or her own way, but it's just about giving, again, that freedom, not over dictating the steps we take to get there. And that's the only way the world works. I mean, look at our professional worlds. Professionals don't operate all in lockstep one right way. We have different roles in the companies that have really different needs in terms of how that work is approached. Thank goodness, because that's much more reflective of how human beings are built. But somehow it's not reflective of that in our school system.
Yeah. And there's so many things that you have said that I'm like, that brings this point to my mind. And I want to hit a couple of them. And then we've got about 10 minutes. So I want to make sure that we talk about, how people can find you and more, more about your assessment. So something that you mentioned earlier that I wanted to emphasize again is the fact that somebody can be gifted. Somebody can have high grades and still have a specific learning disability. So what you mentioned, like maybe they're really gifted in math, but they could have a learning disability, and it doesn't have to even be a learning disability. It's just they're on average or just slightly below average in another subject. So they're not gifted necessarily in all subjects. What we were talking about prior also was that, we have like the Steve Jobs and the Jeff Bezos and these people that, didn't necessarily do well in school by school standards, but are massively achieving adults. There's also the opposite. I've seen people more often than not who are valedictorians and co-valid, just the highest in their class, who are not successful out of school because they've been told so much, this is how you do it, that they don't know how to change once they get out of school.
And to piggyback on that point, so part of the work that I do is consult with companies and hiring and all stages of people development. And particularly post-COVID, but this was already starting. There was a trend that was starting even before then. One of the biggest things I hear from employers is I need creative problem solvers, right? We've never dealt with a global pandemic before. We have technology that is changing how we work in a half-life that's, 6 months, 3 months, month and a half. Things are changing so rapidly that there isn't a playbook, right? And how ironic, and I think now it makes sense in the evidence that we have in the workplaces that we're teaching people, don't do it if it's outside the playbook. You'll get downgraded. You will lose points if you don't do it exactly this way, in the prescribed way, and arrive at the right answer in the way we tell you to. And then we get out in the world where there isn't a right answer, or I mean, there is a right answer. There isn't a clear process, right? There isn't a clear route. There isn't a proven method. And that's what employers are saying. Like, we're lacking this creativity, but we had all the creativity about beat out of us in the first 20 some years of our lives. Because if we said, no, I want to do this assignment a different way, teacher, I want to tell you how much I know about this geographic concept by giving a presentation instead of writing a paper. What happened? No, this is the assignment, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, there's the creativity. We need to get that back.
Yeah. And there has been some shift to that in the last 5 to 10 years. The problem with education is the wheels turn slower than a snail's pace. Mm-hmm. And the higher ed wheels, meaning your high schools and your colleges, are even slower than that to change, no matter how much science there is. I mean, there's so much research and science behind what are true best practices for educating people, times of day, how much, it's all just ignored. Mm-hmm. But yet we're supposed to be using scientifically and research-based and proven methods, but we're not.
And I agree. There are definitely advancements. I mean, I love the more progressive educational systems and leaders who are doing things like exercise balls for seats or standing desks, for example, to accommodate those kids who need to move around and focus better when they do that. Also, the Montessori type models where it is much more open in terms of how you arrive at results or accommodating different styles of learning. So, not to be hard on everything, there's some exciting people, there's some exciting things, but I agree. I wanted to move faster.
Yeah.
And it's because I see the fallout on a daily basis to the human beings in the system.
Yeah.
And what it's doing to them, particularly our kiddos, when something that is a strength about them and an unchanging one at that, they're made to feel is a weakness really early on in life. That just pains me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did a 3-part blog series on what are grades really made out of. And a lot of what we've talked about today plays into that, and how, some teachers do require and take points off if you don't show all your work. Other teachers don't. Some will let you have multiple ways to express what you know. Others won't. There's just a whole lot of things, but I want to make sure that people know how to find you. And I want to make sure that you have shared what you wanted to share about the assessments that you do. I mean, I think you've done a great job of sharing what the results can be like, but, and I know you've said it's for any age, but is there truly an age like that's too young, or like how would you recommend that people access you, and what would you recommend they do to get this type of assessment done?
Sure. So you can go to my website, emilymelious.com. I know that's tricky to spell, Melious. Go to the family tab, and that's going to share the information about how we can help families with college age and younger kids. Of course, I work with people older than that. I am an accredited youth specialist, though. So, I have a heart for the kids, because I firmly believe that if we can resolve a lot of these issues at that age, we don't have a lot of the problems we get in the workplace.
Right.
In terms of your question around age, we can assess kids as young as 3. So we have a nonverbal assessment from 3 to 9 years of age. After that, we have what's called a student aptitude quiz for 10-year-olds up to like that high school, college age. And then we have an adult version of the assessment after that. And again, what we're assessing is that natural operating style, how that individual, when free to be themselves, takes action and solves problems. And we know that when they're in environments, school, work, life, home, that give them that freedom, that have the frictionless path, then they're more productive, they're happier, they have better mental wellness, they have better self-efficacy. I mean, all the things, all boats rise with the tide, right?
Yeah.
All the measures go up for those kids who are in environments where they're constantly expected to force fit their efforts to go against the grain and get results in a way that doesn't come naturally. Not only do we see performance go down, there's a direct correlation with grades. In fact, the kiddos that are most distant from the way the school expects them to operate are the ones who have the worst grades. We have behavioral problems. We have higher rates of suicide, of depression, of anxiety. That's also where we get in the pits self-efficacy. They feel like I'm nothing. I don't have anything to contribute. Low self-esteem. So there are really serious across the board consequences. And unfortunately, not enough people are talking about it. The world looks at intelligence and personality, not to say those aren't part of who we are, but unless or until we understand our path from where we are to where we're trying to get and recognize that it's different for each human being. And thank goodness.
Right.
I love that. I'm so glad we all solve problems in different ways. But until we really recognize that and have an educational system that reflects that, unfortunately, I think we're still going to have trauma amongst some of these kids that feel like how they're born to contribute is not appreciated where they are.
Yeah. And there are quite a few differences, different challenges to having a gifted IEP than a traditional IEP. But there were certainly a lot of things that you talked about that I can see anyone that has an IEP have as a challenge. And especially within our education system, the way it is in most schools. And thankfully I get to work with people all across the country as an education consultant in school districts all across the country. And I am seeing wonderful things happening, but it's just tiny little pockets, And so bringing those ideas to the IEP table, to the professional development that I provide to all teachers, hopefully will keep those pockets increasing and getting even bigger. Emily, thank you so much. You have left me with so many. I just want to talk to you like for another hour. So maybe I can have you back sometime because I do feel like there was so much that we've just scratched the surface in regards to a lot of is there a name to the assessment that you do or?
Yeah, from 3 to 9, it's called the Brainiac Natural Abilities Assessment. From 10 and up, it's the Student Aptitude Quiz. And then the adult version is the Kolbe Index. I do not create these assessments. That they're created and validated and well-researched by Kolbe Corp. And then, as I said, their sister company, Dynamind, based out in Arizona. But I'm trained in them, certified in them. I first experienced them when I was in 6th grade. So I'm a test case or, sort of the poster child of understanding really early on what's perfect about me. Because the cool thing is, I know you deal with a lot of kids that you said have deficits. They're often in a room where their deficiencies are pointed out.
Right.
And the other thing that I love about these assessments is that there is no deficiency. It's not at all connected with the cognitive part of our mind. So we can have all kinds of diagnoses and challenges and deficiencies in other ways, but we are all equally and perfectly gifted in terms of this approach we have to life. So, I mean, how many times, I don't think anybody ages out of or can't benefit from hearing something that's perfect about them. And especially our misfits really need to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's a perfect way to end today. That I don't think I could add anything that would make it even better. So again, thank you so much, Emily Melious. Did I say how did?
Yeah, you did it, Melious.
Okay.
Yeah.
Make sure you reach out to her. I've put her website in the chat so you can find it. If for some reason it doesn't show up or I've typed it wrong, please make sure that you reach out to me and I will get you connected to Emily. I think what you are doing is amazing, and absolutely telling somebody what's perfect about them we can never be too old or too young to hear that. So everybody have a great week and keep learning.
Hey, parents and teachers, are you tired of IEP meetings that feel like a battle? Let's put an end to the tension and create a collaborative, calm, and respectful environment together. Shelley Keno, your go-to IEP consultant, can transform your meetings into positive and productive experiences. With Shelley Keno, your child is her top priority, your voice is heard, and you become confident. Shelley Keno is making the world better for all, one IEP at a time. Visit www.shelleykeno.com for more information and set up your free 20-minute consultation today. That's shelleykeno.com, SHELLEYKENOW.